Hello, good evening. We meet at the Krinsa Forum 2022, and with me there is a renowned scholar from Norway, Professor Øystein Tunsjø, Norwegian Defense Institute. It's great to have you with us here in Krinsa.
Thank you, it's great to be here.
Let's go straight to your most popular claim, and you claim that we have a Sino-American bipolar order. In how far it is different from the Cold War as we know it from the past?
Yes, so today we have two states, the United States and China, and they are much more powerful than any other states. So in that sense we have a new bipolar international system. And this system, and many are arguing whether we are entering therefore a new Cold War. I argue that this system will be different than the Cold War in the 20th century. And we see this today in economics, in technology. It's interconnected. We see it when it comes to institutions. They are working differently. And I would argue most importantly, we see this in geopolitics. By that I mean that the United States and China, they are confronting each other not on land as they did in Europe. It was the East-West divide. They are meeting each other in the maritime domain of East Asia, in the South China Sea, in the Taiwan Strait, in the East China Sea. And this creates a very different dynamic, which affects balancing. The kind of arms raising we're seeing today is very different from the Cold War. And the risk of war is also different. I argue it's a higher risk of war in this new bipolar system than in the previous. And it also affects the superpowers' rivalry in the periphery. The kind of proxy wars that we saw during the Cold War, I think we will have fewer of them in this new bipolar system.
It's a very interesting and worrying argument that this system is more prone to kinetic confrontation.
Yes.
How is it?
So the main difference, as I say, is geopolitics. In Europe, as the Cold War started, the United States were conventionally inferior to the Soviet Union on the ground in Europe. So they were unsure whether they could defend Western Europe with conventional military forces. What was the answer? Of course, it was nuclear weapons. So the Americans developed this massive retaliation doctrine and mutually assured destruction. So they said to the Soviet Union, if you cross into West Germany, we will start a third world war with nuclear weapons. Today, in the South China Sea or in the East China Sea, the Americans are not telling the Chinese, if you attack Taiwan next week or tomorrow, we will retaliate against this attack with nuclear weapons. The Americans have never said that. We don't even know whether they will actually defend Taiwan. So it's still unclear. President Biden has said this 4 times, but still we're unsure. But if they protect and defend Taiwan, they will do it with conventional weapons. Surprisingly to many, I argue then that the risk of war is higher. Why? Because we are not risking Third World War with nuclear weapons. We are risking a more limited war with conventional weapons around Taiwan, which is very different from what we were facing in Europe if we had a war between the United States and the Soviet Union.
So let me bring your idea further. One side can be losing in this battle around Taiwan, which is not only strategically very important, but it's also, let's say, the one of the major centers of technology. So don't you think that the side which would be losing this conventional war would try to at least blackmail the other side of the usage of the nuclear weapons?
No, of course. Nuclear weapons will always be part of the military balance. But I don't think that the Chinese or the Americans, if the Americans lose this war in 10 or 15 years, I don't think they are likely to escalate to a global nuclear war because they lost Taiwan. So even during the Cold War, they were not willing to use nuclear weapons just because they lost the Korean War or the Vietnam War. So I still think that it is possible to have this limited major war between the two superpowers, and this war, of course, it will be concentrated in East Asia, but it will have global implications, of course, when it comes to economics, technology, and so forth. But nobody knows, once two superpowers start shooting each other, how this will escalate. But in Europe, this was not the case. If they started shooting at each other, then the Americans have their doctrines. Basically, they prepared to fight that war with nuclear weapons. That is not the case today, so it's different.
So is there any chance that this bipolar system would be a multipolar system, like having Europe as one of the new poles or old poles of the system?
Well, usually in sort of conventional terms, one only count states as poles. And in that sense, I think the only state that potentially can become a pole is India. If they have, then they have to be successful with their economic growth for at least 10 years, maybe 20 years. And I doubt that will happen, actually. The other powers, such as Japan, Russia, Germany, France, UK, they are not powerful enough. They're too far behind, and they will not be able to catch up. Then, of course, it's the question about the EU, whether the EU can, in the years to come, build on what it has today, and it has to develop military capabilities to become this pole, and it has to have this cohesion, which means that they can pull together and have the same threat perceptions and have the same kind of strategic rationale. And I think that will be very difficult for the EU to become that kind of actor.
So in one of your statements, you advocated for a closer German-Polish cooperation in defense issues. Do you think it's realistic, or it's something which should be done but never will?
No, I think it's both. It should be done, and I think it also can be realistic. But of course, I completely understand that there are many challenges. But when I say the EU cannot be this coherent actor, it's because the EU is composed of so many states with so different interests. So you have the states in the south, the states traditionally dominating the EU, like Germany and France, and you have the Eastern European states, and they have all different threat perceptions, different interests. But I do think that in the future, the North European states can have many common interests related to Russia, but also related to other issues, such as economic development. And therefore, I think the best prospect for Europe is, or at least for Northern Europe, is for Poland and Germany to work together, although there are many challenges.
Let's hope it will happen. Thank you very much for this talk.